Well, like the first time I smoked weed, it was with my cousin, and I was like 14 at the time, and my parents were on vacation, and he was kind of house sitting with me. He's older in his like right now he's in his like kind of late 30s, but at the time he was like in his late 20s or so. Um, and yeah, he just had like a joint, and he thought that it might be a good idea to like show me what it's like. His thinking on it was, well, you're still young, and I want to like show you. I want to be here with you for your first time, so that your first time isn't like at a party. Like that was his rationale behind doing it. And so I was like, okay, like I wasn't at all into drugs before that, but I had like a puff, and I felt not much. I mean, I felt really lazy and chill, but then I like fell asleep watching a movie, and it was great. But that was 14, so like over 10 years ago, or about 10 years ago exactly, because I'm about to turn 24. So yeah, that's kind of where it began in terms of the first time using cannabis. But I didn't smoke for another like 2 years after that. If I did, it was like one time here, one time there with maybe a friend, but super minimal until I was like 16. That's where it picked up the pace. Like sophomore year, like summer. Started hanging out with a lot of people that were associated. I dropped out of the high school I was going to. I'd gone to like 2 high schools before, but then the third high school, it was kind of notoriously known as like, me and my buddies have like a term now that we've developed for people who smoke weed endlessly and are kind of rotting away. It's called weedoid. So I think like I was at the weedoid school, and there's a lot of people who partook, and I wasn't really opposed to it at that time. I didn't know like any of this was going to happen, right? Like I was totally in the blind. So yeah, started smoking a lot with a bunch of friends from high school. It started off social. That's not how it went, though. Like, it didn't progress as being a social thing. It ended up being an isolative thing that I resorted to because I started losing friends, funny enough. Dropping out of classes, skipping school to go smoke, having, like, cravings so bad that, like, oh, I'd have to miss class. And even if I didn't have a friend to go with, I'd do it by myself. And then started the whole train of like, oh, I wake up and do the wake and bake, by myself in my car, whatever, before class. Like I have a pretty fond memory of when I was a senior, wake and bake. I do that almost every day. And I go to theory of, what was it? TOK, theory of knowledge. And my professor there, my teacher was Courtney Christopher, and he was like a old ex-Marine who used to fly helicopters, like Chinooks and crazy big helicopters in the Marine Corps. And he knew I was high, like coming into his class all the time, and I would act out a fool. Almost every class I'd start, crazy debates about random stuff, but he allowed it, and he was there for me, and he would like let me engage knowing that I was baked out of my mind. But that's probably many other students that were going there, because that, like I said, notorious school for that. There's, I'd say, 3 major high schools. That's like the MCPS in Missoula that I went to. There's Big Sky, which I started at. I left there, and then I went to Loyola. That's more of a private school that's not associated with MCPS. And then there's Hellgate. That's the third one I went to where I graduated, the notorious school for that. And then there's Sentinel, which is like the jock kind of sporty school that, has its own little kind of cliques. I didn't want to go there.
Wake and bake. I've never heard that term before. That just means just what it says, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. You wake up and you get really high, and then do whatever, probably go do random stuff. Like, I know there's people that like go to work after that. There's people that, go lift, go work out, different activities. Some people just stay in bed, wake and bake, and then stay in their house and do nothing and then smoke more. I was more of that type where I would kind of, isolate. It's different for every person, and for me, it was very isolative. That's the biggest thing I can equate it to. I didn't want to hang out with people at a certain point after smoking. It became not social. Yeah, I started fearing people. Like, I started fearing interactions. I'd go to parties and I'd think all this crazy shit, and I was like, what am I thinking? Like, I at the moment now, I think back on it, I'm like, wow, like, how could I be thinking this stuff? Like, how is my brain processing that as like a reality? The most like that I can equate it to would be like the grandiose thoughts, like thinking of either myself as something who I'm not, as somebody, or thinking other people are, something else that they're not. And then thinking like just like I have control over certain things which nobody would ever have control over, or like that I can dictate how the interactions go, just in my head thinking it. But yeah, just like it's a lot of really hard to explain things. Because like I said, like psychosis, for me at least, it's really hard to like pull back the memories and recount a lot of it just because it was so much. Like at a short span, it like just compressed into this memory chunk that I have a hard time like decompressing and pulling apart and seeing what, I can remember from it. Yeah. I'd say like I got caught up in the vortex of addiction, and when that began, um, it was just hanging out every day and doing stuff with friends, smoking and not thinking much about it, getting with like chicks who smoked a lot. It's like a culture for sure. Like Missoula is known as being a very large dispensary city. I mean, it's just a like statistic that I put out at like, I said this on Dr. Phil, but it was like, it's got the most dispensaries per capita in the entire United States, which is still true to this day. So it's everywhere. It's abundantly available. And when it kind of spiraled really is when I got my med card. I got my medical card, my license for buying weed. And like I spend like 60, 80 bucks per week on that stuff, maybe more, up to 100. It was like a cash venture of mine to like go and spend money to smoke. And, that was just like a financial aspect, but in part like the mental aspect, it was just a very slow degradation until a certain point. And that was like when I had the first experience with psychosis, and that kind of set my mental on fire, you could say.
We didn't know what was going on with him. We didn't know why he was acting so crazy, why he was so defiant and mean-spirited, hard to get along with. We didn't know why. We didn't know what was going on.
The first time it really happened, I want to say it was around the late 2018, early 2019. It was before COVID. It started off as like getting in fights with my parents a lot, in my house, getting aggressive, having outbursts of anger, hanging out a lot with friends that I would smoke with. Like it was still at that point a slightly social thing where I would, try and engage with others, but it would only be like for smoking. Like I'd only hang out with them if they were going to smoke, and we would do that. And so, and it just kind of started from there, like the outbursts leading to me like wanting to leave, get out of the house. Well, I'm kind of broke, and so I can't really afford housing. And I thought the next best thing would be like go staying at the Poverello Center, which is a homeless shelter in my city. So I like stayed there for a week, just out on the street. Didn't have really anything to my name except for like a car and some stuff that I had, because I had taken my car, a Honda, and I just parked it over there and started like making friends. I always want to say like quotations with those type of friends, because they weren't friends. They were definitely just people taking advantage of me. Codependent, yeah, for sure. They saw that I had stuff and saw that, I had money or whatever. And I didn't have a lot, but I had enough to like go buy stuff maybe here and there. So yeah, just like, and they're homeless people. Like it was like people in their 40s, 50s, like just meeting me. I'm like a 18, 19-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid. And so it was kind of scary, like thinking about like a lot of the stuff that I did. It all has like you think about like someone doing that at my age, and it's like a lot of the people I was interacting with are way older, and they had histories and backgrounds and a lot of criminals. So like it was some scary shit I got involved with, but you know, a lot more scary in the later phases where I started leaving Missoula. But the first time, gave away my car, started walking around town just all over. And I was complete psychosis. Like it hit finally at this like breaking point. Because I remember like right before this kind of occurred, I had like a mental kind of shift that happened at my buddy's house when we were smoking, and he gave me his bong and I hit it, and like I hit the bong all the time. So like I didn't think this was going to be like super different, but I took a really big hit, and it was like what they call a chop, where you mix like cannabis in with like tobacco, and we had like American Spirit Light Blue, and so we mixed the two, and then I smoked it, and all of a sudden like I hear this click or like a pop in my head, and it was like like something like I can equate it to like glass shattering kind of in my head, and it was very quick, like kind of split second, and I kind of freaked out. I was like acting all crazy. My buddy had to bring me back to my parents' house. And that was right before I started going and doing all this stuff at the homeless shelter. And so that's kind of what it kind of all began from that like one little time that I didn't really expect for it to happen. Yeah. So, and it led up to me like doing a bunch of crazy stuff, getting the cops called on me. My mom especially called the cops like 8 times in one day, and they didn't really do anything. And then she had to go to the district attorney, and they had to do an involuntary hold to get me in the psych ward. And so they did that. And then the police came and they put me in the psych ward. And then that's kind of the end of the first one, but just the beginning of like how it really went.
I couldn't believe that it was a thing until it happened to Kobe, and the psychiatrist that had diagnosed him with cannabis induced psychosis in the psychiatric hospital he was in had said, it's a thing, and he sees it a lot. And he explained to me what it was and how he could never smoke weed again.
I'll say this, like it wasn't logical. There was no logic there. My sense of logic had completely dissipated to nothing, basically. I wasn't thinking in a logical form. I was thinking in a, I would like to say creative, but it was just stupid. And there was a lot of things I was like thinking that were, because it's like you create your own little world, and everything inside of that world that you're interacting with, the people and the things and everything around you, is like you create your own storyline for every little thing that is involved, and it doesn't work like that. The world that we live in is like very unpredictable, and a lot of different factors come in play, and other people have different things involved with their story, and it mixes. And so what I had to learn through all this psychosis was that my story, like of who I am and what I did, it matters, but it's not the only one. And there's many more. And there's so many other people out there that have, similar experiences, but also to a different capacity. And there's a lot of variations, there's different spins on what psychosis looks like. And I think that's important. It's like just me giving away my car is like one thing, but there's people that, gave away a lot more, or even lost a lot more, or spent more,
We didn't know it was a psychosis at the time, but he was at a homeless shelter. And the next day, my husband saw him at the homeless shelter, standing outside on the street, out of his mind. And I immediately, when he told me that, I immediately went down to the street in front of the homeless shelter and found him, started to talk to him. I videoed him and called the police. And luckily, that time, they took him to the hospital and they kept him there. I didn't have to involuntarily commit him at that time, but I had to 2 other times. And it's really hard to involuntarily commit them. But that time he did go to the hospital and they kept him. And that was a really good thing. It was a really good thing because that's what they need. They need hospitals, medication when they're like that.
I was still super psychotic. They had me on meds that I didn't know what it was. I had to learn. They didn't know either. They had no idea. I mean, thankfully we had one doctor who had a somewhat base knowledge of cannabis induced psychosis and that it was a thing. He didn't know that, like, to what extent it could go, like how severe it can be. My case was pretty severe, he told me, and it's interesting because now I work for the hospital that I was admitted to. And so I get to see a lot of the stuff that I was once a part of, kind of in the psychotic universe. But yeah, like it's definitely a thing. And for the first time, I went in there and I was calling myself Poseidon. I had people interacting with me that were also psychotic from other drugs that we were just messing around, coming up with our own little weird things. We'd wear like little capes around our heads and we'd think all this crazy stuff together. And it didn't really change much, but the hard medications they had me on kind of forced me out of it quick. So they pulled me out of it, kind of ripped me out of this psychosis. And I don't think that's a good thing to do to someone. I think you have to kind of take them away slowly and make them understand. Because I didn't understand what I was experiencing. I didn't understand how to get out of it. And I wanted to go back because I liked it. It was like a thing where I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying myself to my own virtues and my own kind of wants and desires I had going for myself. But that's not how you do it. I had lithium. They put me on a lot of lithium. They put me on Depakote, Geodon, like some hardcore antipsychotics. Those rip you out and they turn you into a shell, and it's pretty obviously known by a lot of people at this point that very, very hardcore antipsychotics can leave people feeling soulless, like nobody, like they have no thought. Instead of the miles and miles a minute I'd be going in my head, it was like 0. It was like I was almost backwards. Like I couldn't think. It made you where you had no thought for yourself. And that feeling sucks. And I didn't like it. And I was used to the feeling of me thinking a million miles a minute of all this cool, crazy stuff that I thought was real and believed.
After he told us, oh, yeah, he understood, he was just telling us that. He didn't really want to stop at that. He didn't think it was the weed that did that to him. He smoked weed again after that. And that was then we went through a second psychosis that was even worse. And you don't know if they're ever going to be normal. You don't know if they're ever going to come out of it. If do they have schizophrenia forever? Do they have bipolar? Do they have other disorders that they never had before? They never had, Kobe didn't have anxiety, depression, all these things, these bad things that they say. He didn't have that before smoking weed. And the idea of having a predisposed way about you, that whole thing is it's still true in some ways, but there's a lot of kids that don't have any predisposition that's happening to. 7-year-olds, it's happening to. 72-year-olds, it's happening to. And it's the high THC, and that's all. It's high THC.
I only have myself to blame in all of this, and I totally take account for that. But that being said, like if I hadn't smoked weed, like none of it would have happened. I can guarantee you that. I promise. Because when I was smoking weed, it was that. Like I didn't smoke anything else. I got it from a dispensary. People are like, they tell me, they're like, oh, well, it wasn't weed. You were smoking something else, obviously. I'm like, well, okay, so then you're telling me the dispensary's lacing their weed. Like that's crazy. And that's all I smoked. I was dispensary weed, okay? I didn't get this stuff off the street, man. Like, once I got to the homeless shelter, maybe that's a different story. But by that point, I was already in psychosis. And maybe that spurred it even crazier. But what really got the fire going was smoking the high-content THC weed that I would get. I'd get 40% bud from the dispensaries. They were up in the levels there. Like, it was getting high. That's really not known for, like, flower to have 40%. But where I'm from, Missoula, we kind of get crazy with it. They tend to go high with the numbers, get like as high as you can go. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of a trigger for me, I'd say. Like, there's some things that trigger me, and people who come at me and they don't know, and I totally get it. I love it when they're skeptical. I love skeptics. I love people who question and with reason and knowledge, but people who just like shoot blanks at you and they're like, what? They don't know anything. It's really, it can get agitating for sure. They blame it on everything else but weed. And that's like kind of going back to like the weedoids. That's always the people who smoke, and it's pretty much always that. Like, there's very few people who don't smoke or don't use weed that have come at me and they're like, well, you're wrong. You don't know anything. It's always people who smoke. I'm like, I don't get it.
There's no words to describe how horrible it is. There's not anybody that I know of that will understand it unless they've gone through that. It's just that bad when it happens. It's just that bad. You think they're never going to be okay. You can't believe that it's weed that did this, for one thing. Then you realize, well, okay, you start to research a little and you start to find out what the real facts are. I have worked in the court system for a lot of years, and my husband is an attorney for a lot of years. And we're not dum-dums about drugs or crime or criminal. We understand drugs, what drugs do, but we didn't have any idea that weed was going to do this.
It got bad to where now I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything because I know that my mental state is very important. And that's a hard one. Yeah, because a lot of people like take advantage of that. A lot of people take advantage of their own mental health and like they see it as like the thing you can play with, and a lot of people die because of it, and I know a lot of people who've died because of it. And so like when people say like it's not a serious thing, well, I like see it as a very serious thing because I played with the fire and I got burned, but I'm still here, And so I don't know, man. I end up crying a lot because of this shit. And my friends always make fun of me from the Dr. Phil show because I was crying like a baby. But it's emotional, man. Like, a lot of this stuff is like it's not necessarily fresh, but it packs a lot of weight with it. So yeah, and I'm not a very emotional guy. Like, I don't cry. I cry very rarely, But when I start thinking about the other people and how lucky I am, because I really did get lucky,
The doctors, the nurses in the ER that Kobe's been to, and the psychiatrist that has diagnosed him with cannabis-induced psychosis, they've all seen it all the time. They see it all the time, every day. And we don't. We didn't see that. We didn't know about it. But they did. They see it. Police see it. Teachers see it. People that work with kids see it, what it does to them.
I have only God to thank for the fact I'm still here. And I think he's a big reason why I am. If I took the other route, I'm sure I'd probably be dead by now. I know a lot of people that go down that route and they don't come back.
It is a whole other hell that parents or that their loved ones have to go through. It's a whole other hell. On top of knowing they're crazy and they're walking around like they have schizophrenia, they're darting in and out of traffic. They can't take care of themselves. That's one hell. And then the other hell is involuntarily committing them to the hospital. It's really hard to do. You have to call the police over and over and over and try to get them to see what's happening here. Try to help them understand he can't take care of himself. He's a danger to himself.
I'd say the most serious part for me, seeing my reflection in the mirror when I was in Yolo County in Sacramento, Woodland, and I had horns, full-on horns, like protruding from my head, and that scared the shit out of me, man, because it was so real. Like, there's nothing realer I've ever seen than my reflection in a little slit in my cell door that represented like the devil in myself. And so my throat seized, I completely shut down, like my body. The next thing I remember, I woke up in the jail cell and they're like, you can go now. Because at this point I was like, you know, you asked how serious it gets. Like, I had to fast forward a little bit for that, but that's serious, you know. That was my kind of last episode. That was the third and final over in Woodland.
My husband and I finally decided that we were going to get help as a family and have it was like a life coach. And we set boundaries about what we're not going to allow and what we are, and that here's what's going to have to happen. And this life coach talked to Kobe and I and my husband several times throughout the week. And if there were any issues or problems, he would talk to Kobe for us and reiterate what those boundaries are. And I could drug test him whenever I wanted to for marijuana. His drugs were always marijuana. It was marijuana that did it. It wasn't other drugs. It was marijuana.
We get a guidance counselor, life coach kind of. And I had to do Zoom meetings like every day basically with him. Started going to groups, you know, like Narcotics Anonymous. I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I started just doing whatever I could to like grasp at other sources of joy, because everything that I had known up until then, since I was like 16, then I was like late 19, almost 20, it had become just a different life. Up in like just my head, like creating this own reality in the universe that like I was so used to. It's hard to get out, and it's hard to find other sources of joy, you know. So just reaching out and getting help, and my support system that I had was really good. And so like I'm really thankful that my parents and I had friends that saw that I was trying to get better and that I really meant it. You know, I had a couple slip-ups along the way. Nobody like does sobriety perfectly, that's for sure. But the fact of the matter is I had scared myself enough to be like, this is not how I should live. And I need to protect my mental state, because that's something that is a gift. And it's something you should preserve and build upon, not degrade and destroy. You know, why build a bridge just to burn it?
His life coach gave him ideas of what he thinks he should do. And that meant going to, even though he wasn't an alcoholic, didn't have a problem with alcohol, he went to AA meetings. He went to meetings with other people where he could talk, and that helped a lot too. But he got through it. Yeah, he got through it, and he wants to be a psychiatric nurse now. And he's going to school, and he's doing really well.
I got a whole life ahead of me, and I'm just very grateful. You know, I'm at a point now where I'm like kind of over the hump that I think a lot of people have later in life too. I've realized that. Like, I'm very young for like my experience in terms of what I've been through and the shit I've learned. And I've been told that by a lot of people. So I know it's got some truth. But I'm not like as smart as like someone who's 40 and had been through this in their 20s. You know, they know a lot more than me. But I'm okay with that. Everyone knows a little bit different about everything else. Like, well, they've got a knowledge in all different aspects. And I love talking to people who have knowledge about this stuff or experience in some of the stuff. because they tend to understand where I come from. Like when I talk to people my age about it, a lot of the times I have
They don't buy it.
they don't buy it. They come in and they want to blame the other stuff like we were talking about. But yeah, I'm like I said, working at the hospital I was admitted to, and it's been really good. I've been able to help somewhat. That's a crazy experience, by the way. Working in a mental health, like working in a psych ward that you were once admitted to, like it's wild. It's a trip, but it's cool. I'm helping. I'm a CNA, so like right below a nurse. If you were to look at it like on a tax bracket, I'd be right below the nurse on the tax bracket. Like 2 below, but yeah.
CNA stands for?
Certified Nurse's Assistant. Yeah, so like in the main hospital, I'll like wipe butt and I'll like help people to the bathroom and maybe clean up some pee if they peed on the floor. Call the security if they're getting mean. Yeah, just kind of like stuff you do in a hospital and helping people, which is cool. It's like what I want to do. And the whole thing I've learned here, like doing all my stuff, it's like, well, at least it helped me find my kind of calling. You know, I kind of figured it out now. Because I didn't know I wanted to be a nurse. I thought I was going to be like a lawyer. I had thinking that I was going to be some sort of game designer or having to do with, you know, some sort of software design, computer science. That's what I was in college. The first round I went, and that did not work out. But now I'm going back for like a nursing degree. So I a little bit of diamond in the rough finding that for me, just a calling that I want to help others. And that's a big part of what I'm doing now, like with this even, just trying to get the word out, because people, is like, they won't believe me. And I know a lot of people are going to comment and they're going to say like, oh, he doesn't know shit. He's going to blame the weed. He obviously has mental problems and it's his parents, or they'll blame anything but it. That's okay. You can do that. But there's going to be a couple people that maybe see this and they're like, they see some truth in it. So, yeah.